Hi everybody, and welcome to our first 10-minute lesson on effective listening. For those who don't know me, my name is Alana Dunoff, and since I only have 10 minutes and I'm a really good talker, I don't have a long time to give you a long bio on myself. But I will share with you that I've been in facilities management for about 30 years, working mostly as a strategic planner, but also doing quite a bit of project management work. I'm also, for the past 18 years, I've been an adjunct professor, currently working at Temple University in their facilities management department. And I'm also a qualified instructor for both the Pro-FM and the IFMA FMP credential. So we are just gonna jump right in because again, I have to try to stick as close to my 10 minutes as possible. So when you first look at this is sort of a crazy looking diagram that you kind of see here on the screen. And this diagram illustrates the 6 primary steps of the communication model. And if at first glance it looks a little bit messy and looks a little bit sort of complicated, you would be right, because the truth is communication is a little bit messy and a little bit complicated. And I'm just going to take a moment to kind of go through this. I could spend 10 minutes alone on this slide all by itself, but I think it'll help sort of set the stage for the rest of my conversation with you. So the thing about the communication model is that there's really a number of components that are really important to the process. The first part is that someone is sending information. I'm sending a message to you. I'm transmitting it in some way. That's the sort of the 1 and the 2 if you're following the numbers. Then there's the receiver who's getting that information, and that's the 3 and the 4. They're getting that information and acknowledging that information. And sometimes we think about that that's what communication is. I send information and I receive it. But there's another component that's really important to communication, and that's also feedback. That's the sort of the 5 and the 6 here. That once that message has been received, that it's somehow communicated back and feedback's given back to the sender that the information is there. What I really want you to take away from this is not all the crazy ups and downs and so on, but if you really look at this model, communication is actually a loop. It's a constant loop of sending information, receiving information, providing feedback that the message has been received. And that loop, that cyclical process goes on and on. The challenge when it comes to listening is that when that person is receiving information, we think we're sending them information, and they might even think they're listening, but part of the breakdown in communication sometimes is that person may not truly be listening to what you're saying, may truly not be hearing. And that's the problem, that's the breakdown oftentimes in communicating, and the focus for the rest of our conversation here about being a more effective listener. Because the truth is we're all really good, we all think we're really good, I should say, at communicating. We say, oh, I sent you the email, didn't you get it? Or I sent you a text, or I left you a voicemail message. Didn't you get what I sent you? I communicated to you very clearly. But remember, communication is not just sending information. It's about receiving it and absorbing that information, what's being sent to you. So this quote by Stephen Covey is sort of an interesting one, sort of food for thought, that most people do not listen with the intent to understand, they listen with the intent to reply. We're a very when we communicate, we like to talk. We spend more time wanting to talk and jumping in and listening for perhaps the break in the conversation to say what you want to say, rather than hearing what that person's really saying and responding to them first, giving them feedback as to what they have said before you jump into your own opinions, your own ideas in that conversation. I know I'm guilty of sometimes listening to someone speaking to me, but part of my head is multitasking. I'm thinking about an email I have to send. I'm thinking about the grocery list. I'm thinking about how my child perhaps did on a test. So we're constantly kind of dealing with all of that stuff in our head and maybe not being the great listeners that we should be. So some of the body of knowledge out there talks about how there are really levels of listening that can be from the ineffective to the most effective. So at that beginning, at that ineffective, most ineffective tends to be the ignoring, where someone's making no attempt to listen to you. When they're on their phones like this and someone's talking to you and they're clearly not listening to anything you have to say. Then there's the pretending to listen, the people making believe that you're listening. Someone's going like this, I'm listening to you, really, I'm listening to you. See, I'm shaking my head, but my head is going with 10 other things that are going on. Sometimes pretending to listen is even worse than ignoring, I personally think. Then there's the selective listener. Selective listening, a great example is when you are maybe on a conference call and you're listening for key words, you know, when you're supposed to jump in, or your name, or something that you know you're involved in. We're only listening to parts and pieces of what somebody's saying. Attentive listening is pretty good. It's about paying attention, perhaps listening carefully, maybe giving verbal cues that you're hearing what someone says. Remember, the communication loop has to be about feedback too. So attentive listening is at least maybe you're like shaking your head, you're nodding, maybe ahas, something to really tell them that you're listening. But where we really want to be is to be an empathetic listener, where someone's really engaging, where they're summarizing, where they're listening to what we're saying. And when you're talking, they're giving you feedback that they are actually hearing you. That really feels good. When you know someone's really talking to you and they're engaged in conversation, they're asking conversations, that's the empathetic listener. And that's really where we want to be. So I have 6 steps, 6 strategies for thinking about being a more effective listener. I got 5 on this sheet, and then I got 1 on the final slide. So the first step or strategy in being a more effective listener is about being present and being more alert. Particularly now that we're spending so much of our time virtually, how do you be present? How do you look at someone face on the camera? I'll tell you, one of the bigger challenges is when people have double screens and they're kind of looking at this way and they're talking to you, but they have 2 things sort of going on. So if you can set up your camera to be face on so you can make sure you're really looking to someone and they know that you're listening to them, right? Communication has that feedback loop. And that also demonstrates you're listening to them, eye contact, even in a virtual environment. But demonstrating your listening is also about those nonverbal cues, leaning in, shaking your head, those moments where you're really letting them know that you're listening to them and you're paying attention with your eyes as well as your ears. Offering feedback is another important effective listening technique. And this means summarizing what they're saying, like saying, what I heard you say was X, or let me understand what you're saying. You may not agree with what they're saying, but to take that moment to summarize that moment for what they are saying and giving them some feedback lets them know you heard them, even if you don't agree, which is sometimes the issue. The 4th one's kind of interesting. That's about postponing judgment. Sometimes, particularly when we don't agree with what somebody's saying, or maybe we have a better idea in something they're saying, we jump in before they finish. We interrupt them in their speaking. I have to admit there are times that I'm guilty. I get so excited about something, I jump in and I interrupt someone when they're speaking, and I don't give them time to finish. That isn't a great way for feedback as well. Totally true with my teenage daughter also. And then the last one is about reacting appropriately. That a part of that communication feedback loop is really acknowledging in a respectful way, that when it is your turn to give feedback, that you do it in a respectful way, that you ask questions, that you think before you just respond and be really respectful. So those are 5, and I have 1 more I want to share with you. I think to be a more empathetic listener, you have to think a little bit broader and a bigger picture. And I'd like for you to consider the following. I have visuals. Consider that we are all like a glass of water. I'm a glass of water. I am full of my own ideas, my own perspectives, my own values, my own opinions. And Jim is like a full glass of water. He has his own ideas and perspectives and values and opinions. And we both probably have a lot of them. So we're both full glasses of water. But here's the thing. If we're both full glasses of water, and we're talking about something and we're trying to come to a meeting of the mind or make a solution. If I'm a full glass of water and Jim's a full glass of water, I have no room in my glass to really hear his perspective, particularly when it's different than mine. If I did that, I'd make a mess and I'd overflow. I just don't have the room in my glass to absorb his ideas. So what do I need to do? I need to empty my glass. When I empty my glass, and I love this visual, I learned this such a long time ago and I still use it. When I empty my glass, I have the ability to hear him better. I have the ability to listen to what he has to say, even if I don't agree. But what if I emptied my glass and absorbed his perspectives and his ideas for just a moment, right? Ignored my opinions and my thoughts and just said, you know what? Let me really try to understand why he believes that. Why is he coming from that perspective? What don't I understand that he doesn't see my point of view and he has something different? And if I can do that and I can really listen, then I can be more in solution mode and I can say, now that I understand him, maybe I can come up with a better compromise. Maybe I can come up with a better solution or a better idea now that I truly understand, and we can come to a better meeting of the minds. So emptying your glass becomes an excellent way to be a much more empathetic and effective listener. And that is my 10-minute lesson. Haha, I almost did it. I have one more slide that I want to share with everybody really quickly, and then I'd love a little feedback if you feel like it. If you like this idea of this little quick 10-minute hit of information, we're going to try a series of these. Next week, we're going to have Jim Myers talk about facility assessments and why the whys behind the facility assessments. So we'll talk a little bit more. We did some soft skills today. We'll do some more operations next week. And if you have any interest in a little bit more of a deeper dive, we're also going to start a Pro-FM credential class. So we've kind of kicked off this class, but we'll start content on October 7th. So if you have any interest in doing a more deeper dive and really getting into learning where you get these topics and many, many more, you can join us there as well. So I'd love it if anyone has any feedback. Do you think this is kind of good? We're all so busy these days, as Jennifer said. Just a quick little hit of information. If you have any ideas for topics, I'd also love that as well.
Hey, Alana, can anybody come to these?
Anybody can come to these.
Okay, perfect.
I might everybody.
Yes, I might tell some of my coworkers to sign up if they have time, because it's a really good way to break up our day with just this 10-minute lesson. So I really liked it.
That's awesome. Thanks, Tina. So yes, bring anybody in. If you have topics and things you want to do between Jim and I bet we can come up with a quick little lesson for you, and then you learn and sort of get on with your day. So that's it. Now you get to go back to your day. So thank you so much for being with us, and I look forward to seeing you next week.
Thanks, Alana.
Thanks, Alana. Looking forward to it.
Thanks, Alana.
Oh, conflict resolution. I like it.